welcome to the Winging It F1 podcast. It's a rare qualifying review, although saying that, we did a qualifying review for the last opening race of last season. And we're back again because we are incredibly excited that F1 is back. We've seen the first competitive session of the season, and there's a lot of things to talk about, a lot of answers to questions, a lot of further questions that we don't have answers to yet, and we may find out tomorrow. We may not find out for a while, but it's great to have racing back. We're very excited about it, and we're ready to talk about I thought a very entertaining and interesting qualifying session, even if it did end with a bit of a squib, with some of the teams not going out and a Red Bull 1-2 again. But to help me talk through all of that is Nigel Chu. Nigel, how are you?
I'm going to give you more than a one-word answer, which I've just done by saying that sentence. So I'm all right.
Is that actually answering the question, though? I'd argue none of what you said actually answers the question of how are you, apart from one word.
Well, that's just right. Like when sports people get asked questions, isn't it? They avoid the question and just like give a neutral answer or a political correct answer or whatever.
Yeah, well, depends on the sports person, but yeah, it is. Yeah, happens occasionally. The last time it was a season opener and we did a qualifying review, I was doing it from the City Library in Dallas. So I'm now back in Sheffield. That was an intense
We did it for the second one as well, you know. We did it for Perez got pulled in Saudi Arabia, and then that was the last one that we did.
Yeah, and we did one for Abu Dhabi 2021 as well. But yeah, it's kind of, we'll do it if it's worth it, if there's stuff to talk about, and there usually is at the start of the season, because this is the first time we get to see, yes, it's still only one track and it's qualifying. It'll be different from race pace, but this is the first time we get to see all of the teams pushing with something on the line. And that tells us as much really as 3 days of testing did. Yeah. So yeah, it's, as we've already said, it did come back as predicted to Max Verstappen on pole position.
Well, just quick, as you say predicted, your article for TotalMotorsport.com after the testing, your pecking order article was pretty much spot on. By the way, you had like Red Bull, Ferrari, then Aston, then Merc, then Alpine. I can't remember what you had 6 of them, but I think it was quite accurate as well. You had Haas.
Haas Alpha, so it only got Norris.
But then I would argue like Norris outperformed the McLaren car and stuff. So
I'd agree with that, and we will talk about it later, because while the top 8 is kind of as you could have expected, or along similar lines to what you could expect, I think there is so much to still be found out in the rest of the grid. It feels like it's really close between the other 6 teams, but we will start at the top. Obviously, Verstappen took pole position. Sergio Perez took second, with Leclerc running second until he decided not to go for a final run and save his set of tyres for the race. So we'll start by giving a word to Verstappen. It was expected by a lot of people, but yeah, can you just talk us through that pole position for Verstappen?
Well, he's done it so many times over the last 2-3 years where when it matters most, he turns up, delivers a clean lap. It wasn't obviously spectacular, but I think that just goes to show how strong and easy to drive the Red Bull car is. I mean, if you look at his lap closely on the onboard, he does very little corrections on the steering wheel, and that's what Verstappen likes. He loves that smooth kind of driving style. I know he's very aggressive when it comes to the racecraft aspect, but in terms of his actual driving style, he has very little movement on the steering wheel. And I think he showed that on his lap at the end of Q3 there, to be faster than Perez, faster than Leclerc. So he delivered. There was I wouldn't say pressure, but because he was the favourite and because people were questioning had Red Bull lost something from testing, he kind of put that to bed, really. And so did Perez by making it a 1-2. So that's why he's a 2-time world champion. That's why he's a reigning champion. So yeah, Red Bull delivered again when it matters, which is what they've done over the last 2-3 years.
Yeah, and it's a hallmark of really the great champions. Obviously, Hamilton before that was his hallmark, where he was able to turn it on when it really mattered in Q3 and put that time in. So yeah, very impressive from Verstappen, and we'll see how they go tomorrow. But kind of, there's not too much to add really on Red Bull. I think we'll move on to Ferrari. What did you make of that decision to save the tyres and not go for the pole position?
It all depends on if Leclerc would have taken pole with that second lap, which I don't think he I think he could have got second. I don't think he could have got pole. I think he was a bit unsure as well. But I think the fact Ferrari were in the fight for pole, if they did do that second run, that is big praise to them because my word, they were saving a lot and not showing their full hand all the way up until qualifying. Because not even in the practice sessions did they show their full hand. But I think overall, the thing with this saving tyres, saving a set of tyres, we used to see it actually very early in the Pirelli days when they had huge tyre degradation back in 2011, 2010, 2012, 2013. We haven't really seen it too much since because it doesn't make too much of a difference. You know, one flying lap, yes, you've got the outlap and in lap as well, and it's a high degradation track. But I see it as a defensive move from Ferrari, not really attacking because I think Red Bull will have the race pace and Red Bull even though they don't have a brand new fresh set of tyres, one of the tyres that they did literally just has the outlap and one sector. I think in Q1 at the end, when everyone went back out again, apart from the sides, Red Bull didn't complete their flying lap on that second run. They just did the outlap and one sector. So they've basically got a brand new set of tyres as well. It just won't be officially called that on the Pirelli timing thing. So Ferrari don't have too much of an advantage over Red Bull by saving that time, but it will over Alonso and the Mercedes drivers. So I think it was I'd say it was right overall, thinking about it.
To me, it tells me that they expect to be fighting Alonso and the Mercedes.
Yeah.
To me, it tells me that they're not. They think Red Bull are out of sight, basically, and I think that's probably fair based off what we're seeing. Leclerc did say he didn't come straight out and say it, but he did basically say that he thought he could have got pole. He said he thought there was more in the car. And the talk all through testing and this weekend has really been that Ferrari expect to have better qualifying pace than race pace. So for me, the fact that they didn't try and double down on that and get pole position tells me that they expect to be fighting Aston Martin. They expect to be looking over their shoulder. And I think it is a defensive move in terms of, making sure they can consolidate a podium rather than being able to fight for that race win. But also, having a tactical advantage or a strategic advantage is only as good as the strategy minds and gurus that are putting it into place. So Ferrari have moved in Aki Rueda, who was their strategy engineer from last season. They've not demoted him officially, but they've moved him back to Maranello and they brought Ravin Jain up to be the race day kind of strategist. So it will be interesting to see how that goes, because I do think, it indicates that Ferrari might have to use, they may have an edge on pace, but to really consolidate it, they could be undone by strategy and they'll need to, kind of play their cards right. So we'll have to see. Yeah. But
I still do worry about Ferrari's tyre deck because I know they haven't been showing their full hand, but from the long runs they have been doing, they've been trying different setups, experimenting with different parts. They haven't shown a long run, which has made it go, that can match Red Bull. It's always been 3-4 tenths on average per lap slower than Red Bulls. That's kind of what I expect for the race as well. So I think you are right. I think they are going to be battling for that third place. And then if they can get the strategy right, they would get it. I don't know. It'll be close. We'll find out. But yeah, it should be a really good fight.
Yeah, I think so. And it kind of felt like a bit of a disappointment that you didn't have Alonso or the Mercedes or Leclerc out there at the end, that it really was, Verstappen going to beat his time and Perez kind of gunning to knock off Leclerc from second place and get the front row lockup. But it makes sense from really all of the team's perspective, where they're coming from, that advantage is going to be key. We saw Alonso, there was a lot of hype. Some of it from Total Motorsport, some of it not, about Alonso, especially after he went quickest in FP2 and FP3, but they weren't able to challenge for pole position as a lot of people hoped they would. And was it? What do you make of the performance from Aston Martin? Is it kind of too easy to get lost in the hype and actually lose sight of what they achieved, or should they have done a bit better?
I think it was too easy to get lost in the hype. I think it was always going to be really difficult to beat Red Bull. And for me, I think I've said this for the last couple of weeks, I've always felt Ferrari were holding something back, which was the case. So then you end up looking at the third row, which is what Alonso got in the end. So I think they've kind of, if anything, to beat Mercedes, that is exceeded the expectations, if anything. And then the long run pace on Friday, Alonso matched Verstappen's times, so that is really encouraging. And I still argue that Alonso could get third place in the race as well, just going off that. And we saw in testing as well, the Aston Martin had really good race pace, low tyre deg as well there. So then if Ferrari are struggling, if Alonso's got track position over the Mercedes, the only problem is that it could be 2 versus 1. So Mercedes could do different strategies of Russell and Hamilton to jump Alonso, with Stroll obviously not or unlikely to be fighting in the top 5, 6. That could be a problem. But I think for qualifying, they just exceeded expectations slightly, I'd say.
So would you say that? Because I think we all agreed that in our post-testing rankings that they were ahead of Mercedes and behind Ferrari and Red Bull.
Overall, yeah. But on one lap pace, okay, maybe not exceed. I'd say they met their targets then, probably.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's interesting. So it looks like both, well, definitely Mercedes expect to be faster on race day, and Hamilton set his car up for that in qualifying. And then obviously Alonso did his rapid long run on the second day of testing as well.
Day.
So last day of testing. So it feels like both are kind of set up more for the race itself. But yeah, I'd say about, I don't know. To be honest, my expectations did get a bit skewed by the free practice running. I thought they might be able to take it, at least be battling Ferrari. But it was also Ferrari really weren't showing their whole hands, and I didn't expect them to not show it so late. I thought they would show something in practice, but I didn't expect them to be waiting all the way up until qualifying and then be top of Q1. So yeah, I'm not sure.
Alonso only did one run as well, didn't he? So he's in the same position as Leclerc because he was fourth, and Sainz had 2. Did Sainz have 2 runs? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, Sainz did.
Yes, Sainz did. So then, if you think about that, Alonso could have been second row if he had that second run, and given the track was evolving massively, as it always does in Bahrain. So yeah, maybe a second row would have been exceeded expectations, and third row is what you'd expect given how strong they were. So yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, how do you see the battle going tomorrow with the Mercedes? Because the Mercedes they seem to be pretty down coming out of Friday, and then look like they found something, but I'm not sure. It's still really difficult to place them.
I wouldn't be too disheartened. I mean, obviously Mercedes want to be at the front, but given all the talk of having the wrong concepts and they're gonna use a different, they're gonna abandon this concept, I guess. The talk of that, which is possible, they're not that far off. I mean, it's a bridgeable gap. I mean, if you think if they did the second run, Hamilton and Russell, that's a 10th or 2 there, plus the track evolving a bit. So then that puts them only 3 tenths behind. And in 2021, Verstappen was 3 tenths faster than Hamilton in qualifying for the first race in Bahrain. So they're not. If I was Mercedes, I wouldn't be too disheartened. And then given that they do usually improve for the long runs, they should be able to at least be in the fight for the podium. I don't think they will get third, but they'll be right there, is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think as I said, I think the factor is whether they or Alonso improve the long runs, really. But yeah, I don't know. It still feels like there's a lot. There's a lot to be answered, and we've only seen it on one track as well. I think Mercedes seem optimistic of maybe around Australia or Imola, at, bringing more upgrades to the car and pushing on. But yeah, it seems, to be honest, it feels like it would have been met expectations before the weekend, but then maybe after Friday, then they were a bit down. So from that aspect, then it looks like a positive, but I'm not sure. We'll have to wait and see tomorrow. I'm intrigued to see what happens on race day, and then in next place. Sorry,
I was going to say it's so hard to read what is going to happen between, because I mean I expect a Red Bull 1-2. I'll be surprised if it's not. But then behind that, it's so difficult to call given this is the first race. I mean, I'm just trying to think through what. I think it's all going to come down to undercuts. That's what I'd say. I think it's going to be a 2-stop. I think everyone will start on the soft to get the run off the line. The C2 has been rubbish this weekend. So I'd expect soft, hard probably. And then I think, as we saw last year, doing the undercut is really powerful. But then obviously you can't be too far behind to not do it. So, I don't know. I think Alonso will get third. I think Alonso will get. I think he'll have better race pace than the Ferraris, and I think he can hold off the Mercedes.
Yeah, I'm really not sure. I think with Mercedes they've got the wild card that they have got the two drivers, and particularly with Hamilton, then they might well be able to one stop it because of how good he is on his tires, and then go for the more aggressive.
Stopping Bahrain, that would be. I mean, to be fair, we saw it ages ago, like 4 or 5 years ago.
Or go for a 3-stop with Russell or Hamilton, and really be aggressive like that. But I just think that's the wild card that they have, that they can play those two cards. And then Ferrari just don't know. I still think we need to, given this is the first time we've seen them really put it all together, then we'll have to see on Ferrari. But I'm not. If I had to call it, I'd say one of the Mercedes. I'll say Russell gets the podium. I think it'll be one of the Mercedes. And
are we definitely saying Red Bull should win?
I mean, they should do. Yeah, well, they're definitely going to win the race. Okay, not definitely because it's F1, but I fully expect them to win the race. It's more whether Perez can stay on the podium. Again, like he should be able to. There's not, the cars with the better race pace are starting further back, and even then they might not have the enough race pace to beat the Red Bull and Ferrari, the ones that are closest to them. Yeah, I don't know. I think if it's not a Red Bull 1-2 or a Red Bull double podium, then I think it will be a Ferrari and Mercedes on the podium.
I think the only way Verstappen can lose is if he isn't leading after lap 1, which I think it will be. But if he isn't, and say it's Perez or Leclerc ahead, the pace might be a bit slower, and they're all kind of in a bit of a train within 8-9 seconds. And then Alonso, this is just my dream process. Alonso undercuts
the entire grid.
2 or 3 cars. Oh, say if Alonso is in 4-4 third, then Alonso jumps Verstappen with the undercut. Because I think Alonso's the only one, from what I've seen, who on race pace can match Verstappen. He just needs to get that track position, and starting 4 places behind is going to be hard. So I think, that is the only way, is if Verstappen's not leading. The pace is a bit slow with either Leclerc or Perez at the front, and they're all kind of in a queue. And then Aston Martin gamble by going early, undercutting, get that track position, and then it'll be game on. That's the only way I can see it, really, because safety cars getting a cheap pit stop, or virtual safety car getting a cheap pit stop with that. If you're ahead, you're going to be running longer than your rivals anyway. So then, if there is a safety car at the right time, they've pitted, you haven't, then it'll just benefit you. So I don't really see that being a factor. But yeah, I'd predict a Red Bull 1-2 Alonso podium.
It's just so easy to overtake in Bahrain as well. There's like 4 straights, so that's the kind of it is hard to kind of see away from that. But yeah, I just don't see, barring like reliability, I don't really see how Verstappen won't win. But that's why we love F1. Red Bull had 2 DNFs last season. Speaking of the start, actually, Verstappen had a rubbish practice start in FP3. So if he repeats that, he went into anti-stall. So if he repeats that, then maybe. But yeah, moving on to the final of the top 4 teams, with Lance Stroll in 8th, who did come back. Everyone expected him not to, and it to be Felipe Drugovich in the car, but Stroll's back, and he struggled with his hands, his right hand turning into turn 1 on Friday, and was a bit better today, and qualified 8th, kind of not, half a second off Hamilton 7th. So do you think it was the right decision for Stroll to come back? I mean, assuming he'd made the decision himself.
I think it was, because a lot of people get praise. I remember De Vries struggled to get out of the car last year during his debut. Because the reason why people said, "Oh, what's Stroll doing?" is because he was struggled to get out of the car, the team pulling him out after FP2 on Friday. But we see, say if this was like Alonso or Hamilton, I think they would be getting praised for fighting on. But because it's Stroll and people don't have that kind of perception about him, I don't think people kind of see him as that look what he's doing. He's fighting. He's in pain, but he's still carried on. That's how I kind of see it. And obviously, you can go back to the old dinosaur world and say, "Oh, look at the 80s and 70s when Lauda was, burnt and he carried on stuff like that." Obviously, the world has changed, but ultimately, if he's passed a safety test when you have to get out the car within, I think it's 10 or 15 seconds, the extraction test, sorry, which he has passed. That's why he's allowed to drive. I mean, arguably, you could say they should test it after he's a bit knackered, which he was in practice, but he passed that. So I think it's up to him. And I think other drivers will be getting praised for it, but he hasn't really been praised for it too much. So for me, I think it's fine, given that he's passed those tests.
I think the difference with him and other drivers is he a performance upgrade for the team? Now, there's kind of two competing things for me. One is if it's his choice, he's got to be selfish. Like, he's a sports person.
Yeah.
He doesn't want, even though his dad owns the team and it looks like he's just got a guaranteed seat forever, it still doesn't look great on him if Drugovich comes in or Vettel comes back and they're really strong. And then he's got pressure on him in Saudi Arabia, or, people are saying, why not keep Drugovich in the seat? He did great in testing, blah, blah, blah. So I think from his angle, I assume it's him that's made the decision and the team have supported whatever decision he's wanted to make. So for his point of view, I completely get it, because you got to be selfish. But I think the criticism is more like, if Hamilton comes in at 80 or 90%, or Alonso comes in at 80 or 90%, they're a lot better than, or I'd say better than whatever's going to be coming in. I don't know who Mercedes would bring in as their, or, Mick Schumacher. I'd say a Hamilton a bit less than 100% is still better than Mick Schumacher at 100% coming in as a reserve. Whereas Stroll, is he better than Drugovich, who's had, an injured Stroll? Is he better than Drugovich, who's had that time in the car? I'd say maybe that's where the criticism is coming. Is it best for the team? Is he helping the team, or is he actually hindering the team because he's slower and he can't, he's not able to race at his full potential? So that's the way I see it. But as I say, it's not.
From what I saw, I kind of thought it was a safety thing. People weren't happy with that. But for me, if he's passing the tests, I mean, you can argue about the test should be different. Like I said, they should do it after he's a bit tired and stuff. Then that means he's fine to race. It is his decision, and I credit him for fighting on personally. And then to get 8th is a pretty good result. Because I mean, I was thinking, oh my word, he could be out in Q1, Q2 here, because he did not look good on Friday. But then on Saturday, there were no signs of any problems with him really. So I think in the end, it was the right thing to do. I think he's done well to get 8th.
Yeah, and also like half a second back from Alonso, how close would he expect to be to Alonso anyway? Like, like 0.3 maybe, a best case scenario. So I don't think I think on Friday, then it looked a lot worse when he was having to take his right hand off the wheel to make the turn, which they usually only do at the Monaco hairpin. But yeah, he does seem to have brought it back, but he hasn't done a full race distance yet, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, he's going to have to fight in the race. I feel he could be in some serious pain. Hopefully, he is all right and he doesn't have to do any emergency jump outs, or he doesn't have a crash and get even more injured, because that will be, I mean, that will be really bad. So hopefully he just has a clean race, and even if he is a bit off Alonso, having that clean race, then 2 weeks to recover. I think that's the main thing for Stroll.
Yeah, definitely, and I hope he does well and is able to kind of race the fullest of his abilities. So that ends the top 8, the top 4 teams, and then there's a gap. I mean, there was only 1/10 from Stroll to Ocon on, in qualifying, but in terms of performance, there is a definite gap between those and the rest of the 6 teams. And basically, it seems AlphaTauri are in trouble, I'd say. But apart from that, like, it does seem really open. Norris was 11th in a McLaren that really seems, still seems off the pace. And it seems like a lot of what we saw in testing is true, but he's managed to bring it to 11th. And then you've got the Alfa Romeo's kind of, I guess, in the average point of 12th and 13th. Like, it's just so wide open in the midfield and the back of the pack.
But even AlphaTauri, Tsunoda didn't improve for some reason in Q2. I can't remember why. But in Q1, he did a 1:31.4, and the cut-off time to get into Q2 was a 1:30.8. Okay, so he's 6 tenths off still. But then the evolution of the track, he's not that far behind his Tsunoda. De Vries had an awful debut, unfortunately. But even the AlphaTauri, if we're saying that's the worst car, which I'd agree, it probably just about is. But it's not. like that far off. He could easily be, seventh or sixth, even fastest team come the next few races, perhaps if it suits the track. So it is literally just a field. We joked about this, I think, last year about not having a midfield. It's just a field. That's what we've got from fifth all the way down to 10th for me. And it's just coming down to the drivers, coming down to the setup, the engineers who can nail the laps. It's all coming down to that because it is so close. There must be, if we took the absolute pure performance of those cars from 5 to 10, it must be 2 or 3 tenths at most. And then the drivers are just making the difference, I think. So it is incredible. I mean, in Q2, I think the entire field was split by 1.2 seconds. I cannot remember the last time on a track that isn't like Austria where it's quite short. On a track this long, where the field is split by such a close margin in F1, so it's fantastic to see. Esteban Ocon ended up getting the best result out of the lot with ninth place. Hulkenberg as well on his full-time return, getting 10th, which I'm sure Adam's happy about. Big credit for him. And then Norris obviously
What, for me or
maximising. Well, both of you, and then Norris maximising the McLaren, which probably isn't that good, but then because it's Norris and he's been probably his top 5 driver over the last 2 years, he's got it into 11th. So it's just so close. It's going to chop and change, I think, over the next few races. And the race, I mean, any one of them can get points, quite frankly.
Especially if we see, retirements like we have done in a few season openers previously, then that really opens it up. But even without that, then it's still, particularly that I think Haas, Alfa Romeo just seem really tight. Alpine seem to be, closer to that battle than to the midfield. McLaren seem a bit far off, but with Norris, then anything is possible within reason. And Williams do seem to be really competitive as well. With Sargent was so close to making it through. He literally, he was out by no time. He said that in his post-race press conference that he's missed out by nothing. He's at the same time to the thousandths of second by as Norris, and because Norris had said it first, then he was the one who missed out. Do you think that's fair, or do you think they could go off some other, the second fastest time they set or something like that?
Well, that's a good question. That I don't think anyone's ever asked me that. Is that fair? I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. So, but equally,
do you reckon though?
Doing it
because it is like you set the fastest. Oh, sorry, you set the exact same time, and then there's 5 places difference between where they're starting in the race.
Yeah, but that's just the way it is, isn't it? I think it's fine. The problem with doing it on like your second fastest time is, in F1, what if you only do like one? No, because you wouldn't do one run, would you? I'm not sure. I think it's fine. The way it is now is quite easy to understand, I guess. Like you kind of know straight away who set it first. Was with your way, you kind of have to look back and rely on the commentators and that to tell you. And obviously, they would find out after like 10 seconds. But the way it is now, you kind of know instantly, which is quite good. Because like, imagine it when it happened in 1997 for pole position at the European Grand Prix when Frentzen, Schumacher, and Villeneuve, they were all tied, and they did it your way. It would be quite difficult to like get that instant excitement or reaction, I guess, to who got pole. Whereas with this system, we kind of knew or know who it was. If you get me.
Yeah, and the argument for F1 would be that as the track gets faster through the weekend, so and through the qualifying session, so setting that time 5 minutes before is more impressive an achievement because you've had to push a bit more. So that's that's the logic for it, but it does just seem really harsh when it just comes down to who set it first. I don't know. It's
like
not...
1/1000. That is literally like it could be where they put a transponder. That is literally the difference.
Or they could
unbelievable.
like could they just have a 6-car Q2?
That's a good idea. I like that. Yeah, that's a good idea.
That. Well, there we go. Domenico, then you check in the post.
So then what would you do for like if it was in Q3?
Well, like, that would be an issue.
What would you do then?
That'd be a one race shootout.
Okay, you mean one lap?
Yeah,
One lap
yeah,
or
sorry,
one race?
Yeah,
Was that
one race.
56 laps if they had one position? That's a bit
Yeah,
harsh.
no, one lap shootout.
Okay. And how would you decide who starts where for that?
Yeah, that's a good point actually.
Equal across the line.
I don't know, best of three. This is getting
Best
too
of three.
ridiculous.
Okay. I see.
No. Maybe just do that if it's to decide who gets into Q2 or Q3.
Okay.
And then go with either like who set it first or who had the fastest previous lap. If it is to decide positioning within that. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. It's a bit harsh, but overall, I think it's really, really positive for Williams. They seem to have taken a step forward, and yeah, it's again like we'll have to see for other races where it comes because this is such a wide open battle, and that's what's fantastic. And hopefully, it's interesting on race day as well. But have you got anything else that you want to add before we finish this recording?
I don't think so. I think it might not be the most exciting race at the front, but I think behind that, it should be amazing. And I also don't think Red Bull are gonna. I mean, I said this after testing. I didn't think Red Bull were gonna dominate the season, but this for me is kind of confirmed it because if they were 5 or 6 tenths ahead, I would have gone, "Oh God, we're in for a long one." But they're not. So I think that's encouraging for the sport because we want it to be close. We want that title fight, and I think there's still a decent chance that we might get that.
And speaking of long, Freddie has now cut his hair, but he will be back with us for our race review podcast on Sunday or Monday evening. So look out for that popping into your feeds. But with that said, enjoy the race, and we'll look forward to analysing it and breaking it down. Hopefully, it will be an amazing one tomorrow. So thanks very much for listening, and goodbye. You can't hear thumbs up.